President Donald Trump has promised to hike nearly all of his tariffs on foreign steel and aluminium to a punishing 50%. The deadline's this Wednesday, a move that experts say would hammer businesses from car makers to home builders and likely push up prices for consumers. Meanwhile, the White House has officially asked Congress to claw back $9.4 billion in already approved spending, taking funding away from programs targeted by Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. It's a process known as rescission, which requires Trump to get approval from Congress to return money that had previously been appropriated. Well, the latest then, US stocks drifting in tentative trading following a potentially discouraging signal on the job market and the economy.
Canada's steel industry was already feeling the heat from Donald Trump's 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium imports. Now, with the levy doubling to 50%, the sector is bracing for a full-blown meltdown.
Basically consider the U.S. market closed, completely closed, doors slammed shut, if you will, to Canadian steel. So this is our SOS moment, I'm calling it. We need urgent action.
There's anger across the border after the U.S. president signed an executive order Tuesday, cranking up import taxes for U.S. companies buying the key materials from elsewhere. Canada is the largest supplier of steel and aluminium to the US. Mexico is the third. The US's southern neighbor had slammed the tariff increase as unfair and unsustainable for a country that actually buys more US steel than it sells. President Sheinbaum says she's prepared to hit back.
If they do not reach an agreement, then next week we will also be announcing some measures that we would be taking, which is not about an eye for an eye, but rather about the protection of our industry and our jobs.
Mexico had been hoping to secure an exemption like the UK. It's being spared from the hike after being the only country to strike a trade deal with the US during the 90-day pause on Trump's tariffs. The EU also wants a similar agreement, or it could resort to retaliating with a previously agreed €21 billion package of levies on US exports. The two sides did strike a more conciliatory tone after talks on the sidelines of an OECD gathering in Paris Wednesday, but the EU's trade commissioner did make the bloc's frustration clear.
Of course, we discussed this with the US trade representative, Ambassador Jameson Greer, and I told him that we strongly regret this latest US decision, and I explained to him that it clearly doesn't help the ongoing negotiations, especially as we are making progress.
For Trump, this latest increase is aimed at breathing new life into domestic production of the key materials, but the US faces several structural challenges to achieving this.
The tariffs from Trump that may ignite his fan base, his voters, those who see him as the MAGA messiah. However, from the business level and from the world of commerce, there is a different story emerging. Let's bring in for a better and broader analysis Gavin Bade. Gavin writes on trade and economic policy for the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal, one of my favourites. So, Gavin, it's a pleasure to have you on the programme to shine your light upon this topic, which I think many people don't quite see what it means. But this is, I think it's fair to say, something that is going to touch everybody across the world in some way, shape or form.
Yes, I think, steel, aluminum, two very, primary materials for, building materials, buildings, pipelines, everything across the world. And I think this will reverberate through, every country, basically. And I think we have yet to see if there will be deals struck with other nations. As you said, a lot of countries are looking for similar arrangements to what the UK received when they got a break on the steel tariffs, and they got a quota on their automotive tariffs so they can export a certain amount to the US before tariffs kick in. I think you're going to see a lot of countries trying to drive that bargain with the US. I'm not so sure the Trump administration is very amenable to that right now. My sources close to the administration have said since the UK deal that they don't want to give more wiggle room on those national security tariffs, these so-called Section 232 tariffs. Remember, these are different entirely from the Liberation Day tariffs that were questioned in court, actually ruled illegal by a court last week, and then the Trump administration appealed. That didn't touch any of these steel aluminum tariffs at all. And so I think you're going to see those enter more into these discussions about the Liberation Day tariffs as well.
But 50%, I mean, say it ain't so. Is Trump going to go through with this, or is this some kind of Trumpian brinkmanship at work?
I think he's going to go through with it, at least for many economies. I mean, the real target here is the Chinese economy. And the reason they did this is because steel workers and steel executives in the US told the Trump administration that even 25% tariff was not enough to block Chinese steel from coming into the country. And the question then is, well, why hit the rest of the world? And the answer is because the administration is worried about what's called transhipments. So Chinese companies exporting to another country, a third country, where they will alter the steel. Maybe they roll the steel, maybe they alter it a little bit, and then they say, oh, actually, this steel is from Korea, or this steel is from somewhere else. And then they export it to the US. So to stop that transshipment problem, their solution is a blunt one. We're just going to tariff everyone across the world to make sure that Chinese steel can't find its way into our economy with a lower tariff. Now, obviously, there is a lot of collateral damage that results from a tariff decision like that, but they would say it's worth it because they want to see the U.S. productivity of the U.S. steel industry really grow here. And I think that's the constituency he's really looking at. The steel companies and the steel workers in the United States are an extremely politically powerful constituency here. You know, they're located in a lot of swing states. Their union is still very organized, even in an economy where there isn't much union power. And so they get most of what they want out of both Democratic and Republican administrations. So I think he's really trying to please the steelworkers and the steel industry here.
Indeed, it's got that Make America Great Again sort of stamp all over it, hasn't it, in many ways. That Rust Belt area that you're talking about, Gavin, of course, very much the target audience. But as you say, world markets are affected too. Business these days is, of course, intertwined, joined up across the globe. Imports, exports, there are many products that, of course, have several components from different countries involved in it, even if it's ostensibly made in one particular country. So the question is, after that very long preambulation, will Trump eventually be bitten back by this? Will this backfire on him in some way, do you think?
I think that it could. I think the most immediate way that it could backfire is by derailing some of these negotiations that have been ongoing with the EU, with Japan, with other nations, right? They're going to say, well, we thought we were having good conversations, and then you just spring this tariff increase on us just out of nowhere. And they didn't really notify any allies or trading partners before they did this. And so I think a lot of foreign governments in the near term are going to think, what is the wisdom of making a trade deal with the United States, especially if it doesn't specifically address these sector-specific tariffs, whether on steel, automobiles, lumber, pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, all of these. He keeps hitting all of these industries with tariffs on top of the reciprocal tariffs that were applied to every nation in their own way, right? And so I think if people think that he's just going to, keep doing this and keep rolling out these Section 232 national security tariffs, it may be very difficult for him to come to a deal on this. And then longer term, I think you might see some impacts in the U.S. economy as well, some rising costs, especially for American manufacturers that perhaps import a type of specialty steel that is not made in the U.S. Trump would say, well, we want them to make that in the U.S., but that doesn't just happen overnight, right? So I think you will see some ripple effects with like small, medium-sized, and even large U.S. manufacturers who have to get something from overseas.
Gavin Bade, you're welcome anytime, sir. Thank you very much indeed for shining that light on this topic of Trump's tariffs. We wait to see, of course, the size and the effect, but Gavin Bade giving us a real introduction as to what to expect coming up. Gavin, thanks again for joining us here in France 34. We do appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.